Hey, this is Jamie at Stonemaier Games, and today Biddy and I are here to present my top 10 favorite cooperative games that play well, that play well specifically at two players. So this isn't limited to cooperative games that only play well at two players, because honestly there are very few of them, which has become noticeably apparent to me during a pandemic when my main in-person, really my only in-person gaming partner has been Megan, with a few exceptions wearing masks with my coworkers. And so it's made me kind of want more cooperative games that are specifically made at two players, or even if they are made for higher player counts or more player counts, they really excel at two players. So I wanted to put together this list, and I got some help from Stonemaier ambassadors who suggested a number of different games. And some of the ones that they mentioned that didn't quite make my list were Aeon's End, Arkham Horror LCG, Burgle Brothers, Chronicles of Crime, Dead Men Tell No Tales, Flashpoint Fire Rescue, Forbidden Desert, Fox and the Forest Duet, Gloomhaven, Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle, Mansions of Madness, Marvel Champions, The Crew, Sentinels of the Multiverse, Spirit Island, Summit, Tainted Grail, The Captain is Dead, The Mind, Too Many Bones, Fog of Love, Orleans with Invasion, and Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. And those games aren't on my list for various reasons. Some of them I just don't love as much as others. Some I really do love, but maybe I don't think specifically for the two-player count that they should be on this list. And a few of them I haven't actually played. So various reasons why they're not on this list. So let's jump into the top 10. At number 10, I had one that was real close. I wasn't exactly sure if I should put it on this list or not, but I wanted to put Mysterium Park on this list. One of my favorite games from 2020. This is Mysterium distilled down into a much easier setup. In Mysterium, basically one player is a ghost, they have died, and they are giving visions in terms of these cards with this wacky and beautiful art to investigators to try to help figure out who killed them and where the murder happened. And I have found surprisingly that Mysterium Park actually does work quite well at two players. It's a very asymmetric game at two players. One player is the ghost, one player is the investigator, and you feel this direct sense of cooperation with the other person. It's very satisfying. It's very quick to play with only one other person, so you can play multiple times in a row and switch roles. I really like that actually about it, that you can, within maybe 40 minutes, you can play both roles in Mysterium Park. The only downside, really the only thing holding it back for me, is that Mysterium really benefits when the investigators talk to each other and talk out loud, so the ghost can kind of listen in and help use that information that's said out loud, because the ghost can't speak, to steer the clues that the ghost is giving them. And in a two-player game, it is not particularly intuitive for one person to talk out loud to themselves. But you kind of have to in this game. So it's a little weird at two players because one of the players is talking out loud to themselves throughout the game if you want to play well and play effectively. Beyond that, it works really, really well at two players. And so I wanted to put Mysterium Park on the list. This is probably the one game on the... Well, there may be a few games on this list, I'll get to them in a minute, that I think also play really well at higher player counts. But this is one that I would gladly play at two players, Mysterium Park. At number 9 on the list, I have The Seventh Continent. I don't have my copy of The Seventh Continent right now, but it is a giant exploration game where you are exploring this vast unknown continent. And The Seventh Continent was essentially designed as a solo game, but it can be played with more players. And I don't really play games solo. I have played Seventh Continent with two players, and my best experiences of the Seventh Continent have come with two players, where we just sat down and explored for a while, and we explored this world. We didn't even try to accomplish one of the curses. We just set out to explore and do things that felt good to us. And the game allows for that possibility. It is wide open in terms of the directions you can go in the Seventh Continent. And so one of the themes of this list is that there are games that I think cooperative games that get bogged down when you have too many players chiming in to decide what should be done at any given time. And that happens in the Seventh Continent because there is no turn order and no number of turns. So I could effectively take all of the turns of the game, and the other players could take no turns. That isn't the way the game is meant to be played. It doesn't often happen that way, but oftentimes you can kind of get focused on doing one specific thing, and you can end up feeling a little bit left out, I think, when you play with more players. But when it's only two of you, that's all you have. You're not getting bogged down in all these other elements. I won't go into much detail now because some other games do the same thing on this list, or I have them on this list for that same reason. But Seventh Continent is my number 9 game for this list. At number 8 is maybe the one other game that I really do enjoy at higher player counts, but it also plays exceptionally well in similar reasons to Mysterium Park, and that is Shipwreck Arcana. This is kind of a game of temporary asymmetry and limited information, where in Shipwreck Arcana, one player has a number in their hand and another number where they are trying to help the other player figure out which number is left in their hand after they play the first number. It's very difficult for me to describe how that is interesting in this game, but it somehow is, because there are all these different clue cards on the table, and you're deciding which card to put one of these numbers on, and that, based on the number you put there and the type of card, it gives you a clue as to what's left in your hand. And so one player has that information, the number in hand, and they're trying to give the clue, and the other player is trying to deduct from that information given which number is left in that other player's hand. And then when the turn is done, those roles switch entirely, and you switch back and you do the other thing. I am the player who's trying to guess the number, and you're the player who's giving me a clue. And that goes back and forth. So it's essentially Mysterium Park in terms of that imbalance of information throughout the entire game, shifting back and forth from turn to turn instead of from game to game like in Mysterium Park. It is a wonderful game in a small package, and it does play well at higher player counts. But I think at 2 players in particular, because you have taken away the discussion element, it can play much faster and even more streamlined. Again, this is kind of the theme of this list, that there are games on this list that can get bogged down in terms of discussion when you have higher player counts, but when you have lower player counts, the game runs more smoothly as a result. And so I wanted to put Shipwreck Arcana on this list at number 8. A game that really doesn't have discussion but can somehow get bogged down with more players is Hanabi. And in Hanabi, this is a game where you don't know the cards in your hand, and you're trying to communicate information to other players, give them direct information about what's in their hand, even though they can't see those cards, so that players can play cards in a certain order on the table. And even though there's very limited communication in Hanabi, at higher player counts, you can have certain players that somehow end up kind of feeling left out of the game. Whereas in 2 players, you only have the other hand to work with. And so you are completely fixated on the other person. You are constantly given interesting choices and important things to do throughout the game because of the 2 hands of cards that you have available. Your own, which you can't see, and the other players, which you can see. And so I think Hanabi, even though I will play it at higher player counts, it does play fine at higher player counts. I think it thrives actually at 2 or maybe 3 players in particular. And so I wanted to put it on this list at number 7. At number 6 is Unlock. So this is an escape room in a box style game. There's a whole series of games. The one I played most recently was actually the Star Wars version, which we had a lot of fun with, and I gave it away because we've played all the way through it. And that was actually one in particular where I played the first mission in Unlock Star Wars with I think 5 or 6 people, and had a good time. It was fine. And then Megan and I played the next 2 missions, and it really, I mean, it works so well at 2 players. And I think, again, this is one of those things where if you have too many players, you can either feel left out, or you can kind of get bogged down in making a decision that no one can seem to decide on. And Unlock is a timed game. You have an hour to figure this out. And so getting bogged down really doesn't work in a timed game. But at 2 players, it just flies along. It sails along. And I think it works really, really well at that player count because you only have 2 players discussing things. And at certain times, one player will just simply make a decision. The other player will be focused on something else. And that's okay because you're constantly involved in a 2-player game of Unlock. And so that's why it is number 6 on this list. At number 5, what do we have at number 5? This is a game that I don't own, but I have enjoyed my plays of it, and that is Codenames Duet. This is one of the very few games on this list that is designed specifically and only for 2 players. I think Fox and the Forest Duet was the other one, and I haven't actually played that one. So Codenames Duet is a 2-player version of Codenames, which is a game where you're trying to give clues to the other player to guess certain words and not guess other words. I'm amazed. I'm really, really impressed that they figured out how to make this a cooperative game, but they did, and it's a 2-player specific cooperative game. It's just a solid game. It's just a really, really good game, and I love that it's designed specifically for the two-player count. And so I definitely thought it belonged on this list. I've put it at number 5 because I haven't played it in a while, and I haven't really even thought to play it in a while, but it is a really, really solid game. And that is Codenames Duet. Again, it's a game also that you're not playing against the game itself, but you're playing. It's a limited information cooperative game, which is definitely my favorite. Either that or like a mystery solving cooperative game. Those are my two favorite styles. Versus the style of cooperative game where the game is just doing bad things to you over and over again, and you are just trying to hang in there. Anyway, that's number 5, Codenames Duet. My number 4 game on this list is Legacy of Dragonholt by Nikki Valens. This is an amazing kind of storybook cooperative game. I would say essentially open world cooperative game because you have a wide variety of paths in terms of what you can decide to do in the game. And it does play at higher player counts, but at 2 players, I think it really, really flies by because it's only 2 players discussing things, and there are lots of things to discuss in Legacy of Dragonholt. If you have too many other players chiming in and trying to make those decisions, you can either feel left out or you can get bogged down. Those are the 2 things I keep coming back to that can happen when you have too many players in certain types of cooperative games. But at 2 players, it's just the 2 of you going on an adventure together, and it is so awesome. The core thing about Legacy of Dragonholt is that you spend a lot of your time in this town of Dragonholt where you can go around to different buildings at different times of the day and read storybook entries depending on that time of day and get benefits as a result. And then when you're ready, you can go on an adventure. You can decide, okay, we're going to go on this specific quest. There's a storybook associated with that quest, and you go off and have that quest, that adventure with someone. And you do it together. You do the 2 of you together. And it works so well at the 2-player count because it's just the 2 of you having this adventure together. It's number 4, Legacy of Dragonholt. And number 3 is one of my favorite cooperative games, Time Stories. And specifically, I put Time Stories Revolution on here because I do like the Revolution system a little bit better than the original Time Stories system. I have played Time Stories many times with 4, 5, even 6 players. It's made to only go up to 4, but we've played in teams. And I played most recently with only 2 players, with Megan, and it was one of my favorite sessions. Because again, kind of like the unlock games, where when you have too many players, you can get bogged down in all these decision points. But with only 2 players, we're both really focused on each other and on the game. We're able to kind of enjoy each other's company more and enjoy the mystery and the adventure of the game together a lot more because every other turn we are making an important decision and we get to discuss with minimal downtime the decisions the other player is making. There's also a lot of simultaneous stuff that happens in Time Stories, which I think works well at any player count. But yeah, Time Stories Revolution, I think, just excels at the 2-player count and works really, really well at that player count. And it also scales well. I haven't actually talked much about scaling at these different player counts, but some of these games have slightly different scaling rules for 2 players, but none of these have cumbersome scaling rules, like lots of different things that you have to remember during setup or during gameplay. Or even that you have to play multiple characters. I think that's one thing. When I play a character in a game, I prefer to play one single character, not a whole host of characters. And all of these games, I believe, if you are playing a character, allow you to just play that one character. So that's number 3, Time Stories Revolution. And number 2, I have Pandemic Legacy Season 0. I have played the other Pandemic Legacies with 4, 5, or 6 players. Again, it's meant to go up to 4, but we had a bigger group who wanted to play. But I played Pandemic Legacy Season 0 with Megan, just 2 players, and it was awesome. I highly, highly recommend playing Pandemic Legacy with only 2 players. One is a campaign game, so it's much easier to get together with your significant other than it is to get together with a group of people and play the course of the campaign in a reasonable time frame. We played this in like 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. 2, Pandemic Legacy has a ton of decisions that you make, like legacy-style decisions that you make, either during setup or at the end of the game. And if you have too many people contributing to those decisions, as I did with the bigger groups, it got to the point at times where I was like, we just need to stop discussing this and make a decision. And that was, instead of, those decisions should have been engaging and fun, but when it gets to the point of just saying, okay, just somebody make a decision, by that you're past the point of fun and you're on to frustration. With only 2 players, though, you don't have that. It's just the 2 of you discussing it, and sure, sometimes there can be discussions, but they don't last all that long. And you're not, I never felt left out of it because it was just Megan and I discussing what we needed to do, what things we needed to include, what things needed to happen as we played and as we neared the end of the game and at the end of the game. So I think Pandemic Legacy really, really excels at the 2 player player count. We just had a blast with this campaign, so hence why I put it so high up on this list. And at number 1, I have Shards of Infinity with the Shadow of Salvation expansion pack. This is a game that I've mentioned a number of times because I love the cooperative mode of Shards of Infinity. That's the core game. But this expansion makes it fully cooperative where you are playing against a variety of creatures in these kind of mashed up decks where there's a trait and then a series of monsters that you mash up to form the villain deck, and the 2 of you are playing against this monster. In a series, it's like a short campaign too, which I love. I love that it's a short campaign, but it is a campaign, and so which again I think works well with 2 players. In Shards of Infinity and Shadow of Salvation, the cooperative mode allows you to essentially take turns at the same time, and you can pool many of your resources together as you try to acquire cards. Actually, there's one thing that I always forget that you can't do together, but most of the resources can be pooled together as you try to defeat the monsters and acquire new cards, improve your decks, do all that fun stuff that happens in deck building games. Aside from the deck, the core game itself, Shards of Infinity being awesome, I thought the expansion, in making it cooperative, made it really, really fun and really, really fun specifically for 2 players because of the campaign, because of the decisions you're making, because it is essentially a dueling game that they've turned into a cooperative game. And dueling games, I think, work so well at 2 players. That's what a dueling game often is. So to convert that to cooperative just it really makes it really, really good at 2 players. I know I'm not even really saying anything other than that it works really well at 2 players, but it does. If you like deck building games, you like cooperative games, I highly recommend Shards of Infinity with the Shadow of Salvation expansion. Yes, it's not the core game. The core game is not cooperative, but it's not all that expensive to get the core game and the expansion. And this game does play with higher player counts, but I just want to play at 2 players, whether it's competitive or cooperative. So yeah, that is at the top of my list. Shards of Infinity with Shadow of Salvation. I would love to hear your thoughts. What cooperative games do you think are really, really fun at 2 players? And you can give any stipulations you want, but yeah, just let me know which cooperative games you think work particularly well at 2 players. If you only have 2 people and you want to play a cooperative game, that these are the games that you will seek out to play with that other person, whether or not they work well at higher player counts. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks.